Before working on any equipment, we want to make sure that the power source, the plug, is unplugged and away from the power source where somebody could plug it in. And we want to make sure the unit is off and down. We're going to go through the basic steps of taking the old unit off and putting the new lower on. It's typically several minutes, up to a half an hour to do this. It might take a little bit longer today because we're talking as we're doing it, but it's a pretty easy change. We just want to give you the tools to be able to do it yourself. We're not only replacing the lower, we're replacing the lower boot, so we're simply going to remove the lower boot on the pump. I always put the pins in the box so we don't lose them. Now we're simply going to take off the shroud to be able to access the bolts. I always use a nut driver or a socket, which is a 5/16. It's just although these screws have slots in them for a screwdriver, it's much easier to use a socket or a nut driver. Okay, so now everything is loose with the exception of the 4 hex bolts that are holding on the unit. So we're simply going to remove those and pull the entire unit off. This unit, as we remove the last bolt, it will not fall down. It needs to come out, so I'll show you that process. Once your 4 bolts are loose, this will simply slide off. Once we get it moving, you might want to get a helper. This is a little bit heavy, so we're going to just slowly pry it off. Once you get it moving, it comes off pretty readily. It is on pins, so it's not going to fall immediately. So once it starts coming, we simply pull it off, and then we're going to set it down. You'll find the new assembly is lighter than the old assembly because of the fact that the check valve is now internal. So basically, it's the same configuration bolting back on. We're simply going to do, as we pull that one off, we're going to slide this one on. When you pull the existing unit off, the configuration of the drive shaft does not matter. But we recommend when you put it back on, if it's not already in the 6 o'clock position, simply rotate it to the 6 o'clock position, and that will just help you as you put the new one on. Jake, please. Jake's going to help me hold the weight a little bit as I line it up. Once it's on the pins, it slides on very easily. You'll know you've made it all the way when there's no gap in the back and you can see the aligning pins here and the fact that it is completely on the drive shaft. Now we're simply going to put the existing bolts that we took off, we're going to put those back on. And then we are going to get them tight to the torque specifications in the manual. I'm just snugging them up a little bit now before I put the torque wrench on it. Double check them. With every new lower comes a new elbow configuration. This now has our quick connect clamps, whereas the other ones had screw type clamps, but as you can see, there's a different size, so the old one will not work. So we're going to use the new one. Okay, get our elbow tightened. As I mentioned before, this now has an internal check valve, which is in here, so we don't have the external, but you will get a new valve that simply goes on with our standard cam lock fittings. Now we're simply going to put the shroud back on and our installation is complete. Just as you did with the initial lower, you'll want to keep throat seal liquid in the upper assembly, and it simply goes in these holes. The other one used to go in the top, but we simply squirted in those to keep it lubricated so your packings will last.